Please accept this virgin bride." The rancher froze when she held his hand like she already knew him. The ranch sat alone under two pale suns, a wide stretch of dust and stubborn grass fenced in by old posts and newer metal rails. Windmills turned slow, creaking like tired animals. Beyond the fence, the frontier colony spread out into red hills and black rock flats where nothing moved unless it wanted to stay hidden. Caleb Ward liked it that way. He was not a man who needed crowds. He spoke more to his horses than to most people. The animals listened without judging. The machines obeyed if you treated them right. Out here, the sky was honest. If a storm was coming, you could see it from miles away. That afternoon, Caleb was repairing a broken water line near the barn when the warning tone on his wrist comm pinged, short, sharp, and official. He frowned. He almost never got official alerts. Nobody with authority came this far unless they were lost, desperate, or looking for trouble. He wiped his hands on his trousers and looked toward the dirt road. A ribbon of dust rose in the distance, moving too steady to be wind. A convoy, not local either. The lead vehicle had the clean lines of government transport, and the drone above it carried a bright beacon so nobody would mistake it for raiders. Caleb's jaw tightened. He watched as the convoy slowed at his outer gate. The vehicles were polished, their paint still bright despite the harsh air. A guard in smooth armor stepped out and scanned the area. Then another figure appeared, an official in a long coat with a stiff collar, holding a slate like it weighed more than it should. Caleb walked forward without hurrying, but he kept his shoulders squared and his stance steady. On this planet, showing fear was like putting blood in the water. When he reached the gate, the official smiled too wide. "Caleb Ward?" the man asked. "That's my name," Caleb said. "You're on private land. State your business." The official raised his slate. "You have been selected under the Frontier Unity Accord. The process is legal and recognized by the Colonial Council and allied representatives." Caleb stared at him. "Selected for what?" Before the man could answer, the side door of the second vehicle opened. Someone stepped down carefully, as if the ground itself might be dangerous. She was not human, not fully anyway. Her shape was close enough to make Caleb's mind try to label her as woman the way it labeled other things, but there were differences. Her skin had a soft sheen, like moonlight on stone. Her eyes were larger than a human's, dark and calm. A thin veil covered part of her hair, which flowed in a color that reminded Caleb of desert sand after rain. She wore ceremonial clothing, layers of fabric and fitted pieces that looked both delicate and strong. Small symbols ran along her sleeves, faintly glowing like ink made of starlight. She did not look frightened. She looked relieved. Caleb felt the oddest thing then, not a memory, not exactly. More like a tug in his chest, like a door in his mind shifted in a place he never visited. The official cleared his throat. "This is Lady Cern of House Vey. Under the accord, she has chosen you as her bond partner. She requests your protection and your acceptance." Caleb blinked once, then he let out a short laugh because the idea was too strange to fit inside the day he'd been having. "No," he said. The official's smile faltered. "Sir, you may not understand the importance." "I understand enough," Caleb said. "I'm a rancher, not a noble. I don't do politics. I don't do arranged anything." Lady Cern stepped forward. The guards shifted tense. The drone above lowered slightly as if ready to interfere, but she raised one hand, palm down, and the guards became still. Not like they were forced, more like they chose to listen. Then she walked right up to Caleb, close enough that he could see fine patterns on her clothing and the small scars near her collarbone, pale lines that looked old. Her voice was quiet when she spoke, and her accent was gentle, shaped by different sounds than human mouths were used to. "Please," she said, "accept me?" The official opened his mouth again, but she kept her eyes on Caleb. Caleb looked from her face to her hands. One of them was slightly trembling, just enough to show she was holding herself together by will alone. He should have stepped back. That would have been the smart thing. Keep distance. Ask questions. Demand papers. Call the council office and tell them they could take their agreement and shove it into the nearest airlock. But something in her expression made him pause. It was not romance. Not yet. It was not even trust. It was recognition. As if she had crossed light years to stand on his dirt and had finally found the one place she could breathe. She reached for him. Caleb's instincts flared. He was not used to strangers touching him and not used to anything about this situation. But he did not pull away in time. Her fingers closed around his hand. Warm, human warmth. That surprised him most. He expected alien skin to feel cold or strange. Instead, it felt like a hand that had held a cup of tea, like someone who had been near a fire. And the moment she held him, her shoulders loosened, as if she'd been carrying a heavy weight and finally set it down. Caleb froze, not because her touch scared him. Because the feeling in his chest grew stronger, like a melody he had heard long ago, a tune he could not name but somehow knew was his. Lady Cerne looked up at him, her eyes shining but steady. "You remember," she whispered. Caleb swallowed. "No, ma'am," he said, voice rough. I've never met you." Her gaze did not change. "Yes," she said softly, "you have." The official stepped closer, clearly nervous. "Sir Ward, perhaps we should discuss this inside. There are documents, witness recordings. The council insists." Caleb pulled his hand back slowly, not yanking away, but separating like he was careful not to break something fragile. Lady Cerne let him go without resistance. Caleb pointed at the official. "You brought trouble to my gate?" "This is not trouble," the man insisted. "This is unity." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Unity doesn't need armed guards." The guards did not move. They were watching Caleb with professional caution, but none of them looked eager. That told him something, even they didn't like this. Caleb looked at Lady Cerne again. "Why me?" She hesitated. For the first time, her calm cracked enough to show fear behind it. "Because," she said, "I had a choice, and I chose the only name that meant safety." Caleb felt his throat tighten. He did not like that word, safety, because it reminded him of things he had failed to give people long ago. He glanced toward the house, a low building with solar panels on the roof and a wide porch that faced the open land. It was not fancy. It was just home. A home he had protected with hard work and quiet days. He did not want politics in it. He did not want a stranger in it. He did not want anything that would drag him back into the part of his life he had buried under dust and routine. But leaving her at the gate felt wrong. Not because of duty to the council, because she looked like someone who had run out of roads. Caleb exhaled slowly. "You can come inside," he said at last, speaking to her. "Temporary, until we sort this out." The official started to smile again, but Caleb cut him off with a sharp look. "You," Caleb said, pointing at him, "can leave your papers, then your convoy goes back to town." The man sputtered. "Sir, protocol states—" "My land," Caleb said. "My protocol." The official hesitated, then nodded stiffly. He motioned to a guard who handed him a sealed folder. The man offered it to Caleb with both hands like it was sacred. Caleb took it, but he did not open it yet. Lady Cerne stood quietly, watching him with an expression that was hard to read. Hope, maybe, or relief, or a kind of patience that came from surviving too much. Caleb turned and started walking toward the house. After a moment, he heard her footsteps behind him, light and careful on the hard ground. When they reached the porch, Caleb paused and looked back. "What should I call you?" he asked. "Cerne," she said. Then after a beat, "If that is allowed." Caleb nodded once. "All right, Cerne." She looked at the door like it was a border she was afraid to cross. Caleb opened it wider and stepped aside. She entered slowly. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and oil, and the walls held old pictures, horses, open plains, and one faded photo of Caleb in a uniform he no longer wore. Cerne's eyes flicked to that photo. Her face tightened for a second, like she had been pinched by a memory. Caleb noticed. He also noticed something else. When she walked through his home, she did not look around like a tourist. She looked around like someone returning. Caleb's fingers curled around the sealed folder. His mind spun with questions, and none of them had easy answers. Outside, the convoy engines rumbled back to life, preparing to leave. Far above, beyond the thin clouds, something unseen drifted in silent orbit, watching the ranch with patient interest. Caleb did not know it yet, but the quiet life he had built was already ending. And the stranger who held his hand like she already knew him was the first sign of what was coming. Morning on the ranch came quiet, but Caleb's mind was loud. He woke before sunrise out of habit. The sky outside the small bedroom window was still dark blue, and the twin suns had not yet climbed over the hills. The house was still. No footsteps, no voices. Then he heard it. A soft sound from the kitchen, not a threat, not a break-in. Just someone moving with care like they did not want to disturb anything. Caleb got up, pulled on his boots, and stepped into the hallway. He moved the way he always moved, silent, steady, alert. Old instincts never really died. They just learned to sleep lightly. When he reached the kitchen, he stopped in the doorway. Cerne stood at the counter. She had changed out of her ceremonial clothing into a simple tunic the official must have packed for her. It still looked foreign but less formal. Her hair was loosely tied back. She held a cup in her hands, watching the small coffee machine like it was a wild animal that might bite her. Caleb's coffee machine clicked and hissed, then poured out a dark stream. Saren leaned forward, fascinated. Caleb cleared his throat. Saren turned fast, but not in panic. Her expression changed from curiosity to that calm relief again, as if seeing him proved something important. "I hoped I did not break your home rules," she said. Caleb walked in, keeping his tone neutral. "Most folks don't touch other people's things." "I did not want to steal," she said quickly. "I read the label, it said coffee. Your house smells like it. I thought it might help you feel normal." That hit Caleb in a place he did not expect. Not because it was romantic, but because it was considerate. He stepped closer and glanced at the cup. "Did you already drink it?" Saren shook her head. "I waited." Caleb nodded once. "All right, then you did better than most visitors." She looked pleased, but she tried to hide it. Caleb poured his own cup and leaned against the counter. For a few seconds, they stood in silence with the machine's soft hum filling the space. Finally, Caleb spoke. "You said you knew my name meant safety." Saren's hands tightened around the cup. "Yes." "That doesn't make sense," he said. "I'm not famous, I'm not important." Saren studied him. "On my world, stories travel far, especially stories about war, about humans." Caleb's jaw tensed. "I didn't come here for stories." "I know," she said softly. "That is why you were the safest choice." Caleb didn't like that answer because it sounded like someone had used his past like a tool. He opened the sealed folder the official had left. He scanned the first pages, eyes moving fast. It was full of legal language and council stamps. A frontier unity accord, a voluntary bond request, a protected partner clause. Everything looked official. But official did not mean honest. Caleb slid the pages aside and looked at her. "Did you sign this because you wanted to or because someone told you to?" Saren held his gaze. "Both," she admitted. Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Explain." She took a slow breath. "My house, my family, they believe I belong to them. They planned my life before I could speak full sentences. When I refused, they called it disrespect." Caleb kept his voice low. "So you ran?" "Yes," she said. "I ran across systems, I hid, I used favors, I gave up comfort, I gave up safety. And in every place, someone still wanted to claim me." Caleb's fingers tightened around his cup. He understood that feeling more than he liked. Saren continued. "Then I learned there was a program that could protect me. A program that would force my family to respect the law if I chose a human partner on the frontier." Caleb stared at the papers again. "So this isn't romance, it's a shield." Saren didn't flinch. "At first, yes." Caleb let out a slow breath, trying to keep anger from rising. "And why pick me? Why not a rich man in the capital? Why not someone with guards and walls?" Saren's voice became quieter. "Because walls can be bought, people can be bought, but you," she hesitated. "You are the kind of human who walks away from power." Caleb didn't answer. He didn't like being described like that because it felt like someone reading him like a book. Outside, the ranch was waking up. Horses shifted in the corral. A distant engine hummed as the irrigation pump started. Caleb watched the land through the window, thinking. Then a faint beep sounded from his wrist comm again. This time it wasn't official. It was local. A neighbor ping. Caleb opened the message and saw the name, Juno Pike, the woman who ran the small supply post down the road. Her message was short. "You got company in town. Strangers asking about your place. Not council. Be careful." Caleb's stomach tightened. He looked at Saren. "Do you have enemies?" Saren's eyes dropped for half a second. "Yes." Caleb held her gaze. "Are they close?" Saren nodded once. "They do not travel openly. They use hunters, collectors." Caleb set his cup down. "All right," he said, more to himself than to her. "Then we treat today like a storm day." Saren tilted her head. "A storm day?" "A day where you prepare before it hits," Caleb said. He moved fast after that. He checked the perimeter sensors along the fence line. He inspected his drone tower and made sure the aerial cameras were working. He opened a locked cabinet in the barn and pulled out an old case with a weathered seal. Inside was equipment he had not touched in years. Not for ranch work, work from his other life. Saren watched him from the barn doorway. She did not step inside without being invited. She didn't speak until he looked up. "You are afraid," she said. Caleb paused. "I'm cautious." "That is a safer kind of fear," she replied. Caleb didn't argue. He loaded the case onto the workbench and turned on the old comm receiver. Most settlers used cheap gear. This one was military grade, built to cut through interference. A faint signal pulse appeared on the screen, too weak to read clearly, but it wasn't local chatter. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Someone's sniffing the airwaves. Cern stepped closer, voice low. They might be searching for me. Caleb's jaw clenched. On my land. Cern's hands hovered at her sides like she wanted to help but didn't know how. Then Caleb noticed something strange. Cern's gaze moved across the barn like she had seen it before. She looked at a shelf of tools, then pointed. Your spare power cell is behind the third crate, she said. Caleb froze. How would you know that? Cern blinked, as if surprised by her own words. I do not know. Caleb walked to the shelf and checked. Behind the third crate was the spare power cell. He stared at it, then turned back to her slowly. You've never been here, Cern swallowed. No. Then how? Caleb demanded. Cern's voice shook just a little. Sometimes I see things, small things, like a path I have already walked. Caleb didn't like that at all. Because it meant either she was lying brilliantly or something deeper was happening, something tied to his buried past. Before he could ask more, the outer fence alarm chirped. One pulse, then two. Caleb moved to the monitor. A vehicle had stopped near the far gate, but not on the road. It had approached from the rocky slope, meaning it didn't want to be seen until the last moment. A person got out. Another. Then another, not council, not settlers. They wore travel coats and helmets, faces covered. Their posture said professional. Their movement said trained. Caleb's voice went cold. Inside, now. Cern didn't argue. She moved quickly into the house. Caleb watched the monitors as the strangers stood at the gate, reading something on a scanner. Then one of them lifted a hand and tapped the gate keypad like he already knew the code. Caleb's blood turned to ice. Nobody knew that code except him. Caleb grabbed the comm and opened a channel to Juno. Pike, they're at my gate. How many did you see? Static crackled. Juno's voice came through thin. 3, maybe more. Caleb, they asked if you were hiding someone. I played dumb. They didn't like it. Caleb clenched his jaw. Get inside your shop. Lock it down. You too, Juno snapped. Don't be stupid. Cal, unlock. There was no time. The strangers at the gate stepped back. One of them raised a small device and pressed it to the lock panel. Caleb recognized it. A bypass tool. They weren't here to talk. They were here to take. Caleb turned from the screen and looked down the hallway where Cern stood near the living room, rigid but calm. He realized then that she wasn't just asking for shelter. She was asking for a stand. Caleb stepped toward her and spoke in a low, steady voice. Whatever game they think they're playing, they picked the wrong ranch. Cern's eyes met his, and in them Caleb saw something that wasn't just fear, it was trust. Outside, the gate lock sparked. And the storm finally reached the house. The first thing Caleb did was turn off the house lights. The inside went dim, lit only by weak morning glow through the windows. He didn't need bright light to move in his own home, but the strangers outside would have trouble seeing in. He guided Cern toward the back hallway. Stay behind the pantry door, he said. If I tell you to run, you run to the storm cellar under the kitchen floor. You understand? Cern nodded. Yes. Caleb didn't like giving orders to someone who had already been controlled by others, but this was not about control. It was about survival. He moved to the living room window and watched the outer gate camera feed. The bypass tool finished its work. The gate clicked open. 3 figures entered. They walked like they owned the place, spreading out instead of staying close together. That told Caleb they were confident, too confident. Caleb felt anger flare, not loud anger, the kind that made everything sharp and clear. He tapped the console and activated the perimeter drones, small, quiet machines that rose from hidden housings near the fence posts. They floated low, watching, recording, feeding him angles. The strangers stopped near the barn. One of them pointed to the house. They began moving toward it. Caleb checked his belt and the old equipment he had pulled from the case. He didn't want to fight, but he wouldn't let them drag someone out of his home either. He opened his comm and whispered, Juno, call the marshal. Static. Then Juno's voice tight. Already did. They said the nearest patrol is an hour out. Caleb's lips pressed into a thin line. An hour is a long time. Caleb, Juno started. I know, he said and cut the channel. He watched as the strangers reached his porch. One of them knocked. Not politely. The knock sounded like a test. Caleb stayed silent. The stranger knocked again, harder, still no answer. Then the stranger lifted a small cutter. Caleb swore under his breath. The cutter hummed, heating the metal near the door lock. Caleb moved fast, quiet steps, steady hands. He reached a panel on the wall beside the hallway and pressed a hidden switch. Outside, the porch floor emitted a sharp hiss. A cloud of fine dust rose, irritant powder from an old ranch safety system meant to discourage predators and pests. It wasn't deadly, but it would make eyes sting and breathing uncomfortable. The stranger stepped back, coughing. "Trap," one of them said through a muffled helmet voice. They weren't surprised. That worried Caleb more than anything. Surprised people made mistakes, prepared people adjusted. The lead stranger turned his head slightly, like he was listening to someone on a private channel. Then he spoke loud enough for the house to hear. "Caleb Ward, we do not want trouble. Open the door and hand over the asset." Asset. Caleb's jaw tightened. He hated that word. He did not answer. The stranger continued. "We are authorized by House Vey. This is a retrieval action." "You have no legal standing." Caleb felt something cold inside him. House Vey was Cern's house, so they had come, exactly like she warned. Caleb stepped closer to the window and spoke for the first time, voice flat and firm. "This is my land. You're trespassing." The stranger turned toward the window like he could sense Caleb's position. "Then you are interfering with noble property." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "People aren't property." A brief pause. Then the stranger said, almost amused, "On your world, perhaps, not on hers." Caleb's hands curled into fists. Behind him, Cern stood at the hallway edge, just visible in the dim. She looked steady, but Caleb saw the tension in her shoulders. She had expected this day. She had probably feared it every day for a long time. Caleb kept his eyes forward. "You take one more step and I'll call every camera in the district to record your faces." The stranger laughed. "Record what you like. By the time anyone cares, we'll be gone." Then the stranger raised his cutter again. Caleb moved. He didn't rush the door. He moved sideways, using the hallway corner for cover, then opened a panel under the window and pulled out a compact ranch tool, modified, reinforced, built for emergencies. He didn't want to hurt anyone, but he would stop them. The strangers began forcing the door. The lock gave with a harsh crack. The door swung inward. Two of them stepped inside, weapons low but ready. Caleb waited until they were fully in the entryway. Then he triggered the second defense. A strong magnetic pulse snapped across the doorway, short range, controlled, meant to disrupt electronics for a few seconds. The strangers' helmet lights flickered. Their scanners went dark. Their comms hiccuped. For a moment they hesitated. Caleb used that moment. He stepped out fast, grabbed the closest stranger's arm and twisted it down, not breaking, not brutal, just controlling. The stranger stumbled. Caleb shoved him back outside with force. The second stranger swung up his weapon, but it stuttered, still recovering from the pulse. Caleb knocked it aside with a sharp strike and drove the stranger back into the porch railing. The stranger recovered quicker than Caleb expected. That meant they were using hardened gear, expensive gear. The third stranger outside raised something, an injector dart launcher. Caleb ducked as a dart zipped past and hit the wall behind him. He didn't like darts. Darts were for capture. Capture meant Cern would disappear. Caleb backed into the house, using the doorway frame as cover, and slammed the door halfway shut. The strangers forced it open again, and the cutter sparked. Then something changed. The air in the hallway felt different, like the temperature shifted. Caleb glanced back. Cern was standing fully in the hall now, not hiding behind the pantry. Her hands were lifted slightly, palms open. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing was slow, measured. Caleb hissed, "Cern, get back!" She opened her eyes, and Caleb felt it. A wave, not a physical wave, a feeling wave. A sudden pressure in his chest that made his breath catch. Not pain, not fear, but a heavy pull like gravity had turned sideways. The strangers paused. One of them lowered his weapon slightly, as if confused. The lead stranger blinked and shook his head like someone waking from a dream. Cern spoke, voice steady and clear. "Stop!" Her word wasn't loud. It wasn't magic in the way stories made magic, but it carried something that made the room listen. For one full second, the strangers froze. Caleb used that second. He grabbed the second stranger's weapon, yanked it free, and kicked it across the porch. He shoved the stranger back outside and slammed the door again. The lead stranger outside roared in frustration and fired a small charge at the door. It struck and stuck, hissing. Caleb recognized it immediately, a breach charge. He grabbed Cern by the arm, not hard but urgent. "Cellar," he snapped. She moved with him this time. He lifted the kitchen floor panel and guided her down the ladder into the storm cellar. It was cramped, lined with supplies and old water filters. A safe place if the house went down. He followed her and pulled the panel closed above them. They sat in darkness for a brief moment, listening. Above, the breech charge detonated with a sharp bang. The house shook. Dust fell from the cellar ceiling. Caleb's heart hammered, but his mind stayed cold and clear. "Are you all right?" he asked. Cern nodded, eyes wide. "Yes," Caleb studied her. "What was that you did?" Cern's voice was quiet. "I pushed calm. Sometimes I can do it. It does not always work." Caleb took a slow breath. "It worked enough." Above them, footsteps pounded across the broken kitchen floor. The strangers were inside now. Caleb clenched his jaw. He had always believed the ranch was far enough away from the galaxy's worst problems. He was wrong. Cern whispered, "They will not stop. House Vey will keep sending them." Caleb looked at her in the dark. "Then we don't just hide. We end the chase." Cern blinked. "How?" Caleb's eyes went to the military comm receiver sitting on a shelf in the cellar, spare gear he had stored down here years ago because a part of him never trusted peace. He reached for it and powered it on. A faint signal appeared again, not local, not council, something else. Caleb's voice turned grim, "Because someone up there is already watching, and if I'm not mistaken, they're listening too." Cern's eyes widened. "Who?" Caleb didn't answer yet. Above them, the strangers kicked through cabinets, searching. One of them cursed. Another slammed something hard against the wall. Caleb leaned close to Cern and spoke softly, but with iron in his tone. "When I tell you to move, you move. No hesitation, you trust me." Cern swallowed, then nodded. "Yes." Caleb's grip tightened around the receiver. Outside, beyond the ranch and beyond the town, the frontier was quiet. But in orbit, the unseen watchers drifted closer. And down in the cellar, Caleb Ward made a choice he had avoided for years. He was done running from his past. Now he would use it. The cellar smelled of dust, metal, and old rainwater filters. Caleb crouched beside the military receiver, fingers moving fast across the worn controls. The screen flickered, searching for a clear signal. Above them, heavy footsteps moved through the house, slow and deliberate. They were searching room by room. Cern stood close to the wall, her breathing steady but quiet. She did not look like someone who expected rescue. She looked like someone preparing to face whatever came next. Caleb finally caught the signal. A faint channel opened with a soft crackle. "This is Caleb Ward," he said in a low voice. "Former Ranger Unit Designation Delta 7. If anyone is monitoring this frequency, respond." Static filled the air. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a voice came through, calm, controlled, and unfamiliar. "Signal received. Identity confirmed. You are requesting assistance, Ranger Ward?" Caleb let out a slow breath. "Depends who's asking." "Observation vessel on patrol. Independent jurisdiction," the voice replied. "We detected unusual activity at your coordinates." Caleb glanced at Cern. "You've been watching my ranch?" "Correct," the voice said without apology. Caleb almost laughed. "Figures." Cern stepped closer, listening carefully. Caleb continued. "Hostile entry on my property, claiming authority from House Vey, attempting forced retrieval." There was a brief pause. Then the voice answered, "House Vey has no legal claim under Frontier Unity Accord once bond status is activated." Caleb nodded once, though the speaker could not see him. "Then I need eyes in the sky and someone recording everything." "Already done," the voice said. "Support can arrive in 23 minutes. Caleb looked up toward the ceiling, hearing another loud crash above. 23 minutes felt like a lifetime. He closed the channel and looked at Cern. "Help is coming," he said. She nodded, relief flickering in her eyes, but it did not erase her tension. "They will try to take me before that." Caleb gave a small, grim smile. "Not if I have anything to say about it." He stood and checked the small locker in the cellar. Inside were supplies he had stored years ago, extra batteries, emergency gear, and an old tactical jacket he had sworn never to wear again. He hesitated before pulling it on. The fabric felt heavier than he remembered, like it carried old memories with it. Above them, footsteps stopped. Silence fell. Caleb held up one finger to signal quiet, then a voice called down through the damaged floor. "We know you are hiding," the lead stranger said. "This ends easier if you surrender." Caleb didn't answer. Cern's hand brushed his sleeve lightly, not to stop him, just to remind him she was there. The stranger continued, "Lady Cern, your house has declared you unstable. You are ordered to return for your own protection." Cern's face hardened. She whispered, "They always say that." Caleb leaned closer to her. "You don't have to go anywhere you don't want." She nodded slowly. The stranger's voice grew colder. "Last chance." Caleb moved toward the ladder. He opened the floor panel slightly and listened. The kitchen was quiet, too quiet. He climbed up slowly, careful and silent. The house smelled of burnt metal and dust. A section of the wall near the door was scorched from the breach charge. The strangers stood near the center of the room, scanning. Caleb stepped fully into view. All three turned toward him immediately. The lead stranger tilted his head. "Ah, the rancher finally joins us." Caleb crossed his arms loosely, hiding his readiness behind calm posture. "You broke my door," he said. "That was expensive." The stranger didn't laugh. "Where is she?" Caleb shrugged slightly. "Not your concern." The second stranger raised his weapon again. "We are authorized." "No," Caleb said firmly. "You're trespassing." The lead stranger stepped closer. "You do not understand what you are interfering with. She belongs to House Vey." Caleb's eyes hardened. "Nobody belongs to anyone." The stranger hesitated, as if unused to being challenged. "Your ideals are irrelevant." "Maybe," Caleb said, "but this is still my land." Outside, a faint rumble echoed across the sky, distant engines approaching. The strangers heard it too. One of them glanced toward the window. The lead stranger's voice sharpened. "Retrieve her, now!" The second stranger moved toward the cellar. Caleb acted before he reached the panel. He stepped forward fast, grabbing the stranger's wrist and twisting it sideways. The weapon clattered to the floor. The third stranger lunged, but Caleb used the kitchen table as cover, pushing it into the attacker's path. The fight was short and controlled, not wild. Caleb moved with efficiency, using the house layout to block their angles. He knocked another weapon aside and forced them back toward the broken doorway. They were skilled, but they weren't ready for someone who knew every inch of the ground beneath his boots. Saren emerged from the hallway, eyes focused. She lifted her hands again. That same calm wave filled the room, not overwhelming, but enough to slow their reactions. The strangers hesitated just long enough. Outside, shadows crossed the ground. A sleek craft descended, engines humming low and powerful. Dust spiraled into the air around it. The lead stranger cursed. Interference confirmed. A voice boomed from outside through amplified speakers. "This property is under observation. Stand down immediately." The strangers exchanged quick looks. They had lost the advantage. The lead stranger stepped back slowly. "This is not over," he said quietly to Saren. Saren met his gaze without fear. "It is finished." The strangers retreated toward their vehicle, movements tense and controlled. Within moments they were gone, racing across the desert. Caleb stood still for a long time after the dust settled. Only when the craft outside powered down did he allow himself to relax slightly. Saren walked closer, her expression soft but serious. "You could have refused," she said. "You did not have to fight for me." Caleb looked at the broken door, the damaged walls, the quiet ranch beyond. "Maybe," he said, "but I did." She tilted her head. Why? Caleb thought about it. Because she had asked for safety. Because nobody deserved to be treated like property. Because something about her presence felt familiar, even if he could not explain it. Because it was the right thing, he said finally. Saren smiled faintly, not bright or dramatic, just warm. Outside, the craft door opened, and a uniformed officer approached, ready to begin official reports. Caleb knew life would not return to quiet right away. There would be questions, investigations, maybe more trouble ahead. But for the first time since the convoy arrived, the ranch felt steady again. Saren stood beside him, not behind him, not as property, not as obligation, as someone who had chosen to stay. Caleb looked toward the horizon where the twin suns were climbing higher, turning the land gold. "Guess we have some repairs to do," he said. Saren nodded. "Yes," she replied softly. "Together." And as the wind moved across the open fields, the ranch felt less like a hiding place and more like the beginning of something new.